Hello, everyone. My name is Paballo Chauke, and I'm honored and privileged to have a conversation with Professor Eric Topol on the topic of the next frontier in personal genomics or personal medicine. Just a very, very short intro because Dr. Topol has an illustrious career, and I don't have time to read the whole bio. But just to say, Dr. Eric Topol is the founder and director of Scripps Research Translational Institute. He's also a professor of molecular medicine, as well as the executive vice president of the Scripps Research. Hello, Prof. Topol. Thank you so much for agreeing to have this fireside chat and conversation in your busy schedule. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Paballo. I'm sorry. Let me just say, it's really a privilege to join you. I wish I could be in Cape Town, my favorite place in the world to come visit. And I know you're having a great meeting there, and I thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think due to time constraints, I'm going to jump right into it. There are many different interpretations as well as debates about the meaning or the concept of personalized medicine. So for you, can you please give us some insight into what you mean when you use the term?
Right. So I've never been happy with that term personalized medicine because it tends to be overused, kind of hackneyed and like a monogram or something like that. And I much prefer the term individualized medicine. And the reason I like that is because we're really looking at the science of the individual, what makes each of us unique. I mean, of course, even identical twins. And so that individuality is what I think we're really after. And also, of course, the idea that as we are making more progress in this field, that each individual will have more ability to know the roots of their uniqueness. I mean, that's really, I think this is what it's about. And I guess also another term that's used a lot, Paballo, is precision medicine. And precision medicine, I have a little bit of a problem with that term too, just because if you keep making the same mistakes again and again in medicine, it's very precise. What we really need is accuracy in medicine. And so I think there's an interaction between individualized, where we're trying to understand the uniqueness of each person with this multiple layers of data, of course, including genomics, and then making that for more accurate medicine so we don't treat all people the same as we commonly do. So there's a real, I think, tie-in between individuality, the new medicine that we can start, of course, now, but hopefully will get better and better over the years ahead, and feature this higher level of accuracy, which we really need.
Thank you so much for that answer, Prof. So do you think we need to change the title or the term to individualized medicine? Is that what you're campaigning for?
Well, back several years ago, I wrote a review in Cell. It was about this topic, individualized medicine, and I called it From Womb to Tomb, and how, this is, I think we have to understand this uniqueness of individuals, at different time points. A mentor of mine said, Eric, you should have called it From Lust to Dust. But of course, that review really defended the term individualized medicine, and unfortunately it's never been picked up. It's still being called personalized, which I just think is not the ideal term, but we have to live with it. I guess it's kind of inculcated and it's become a common use.
So thank you so much for that answer, Prof. Eric Topol. So in your view, as an expert in the field of personalized/individualized medicine, what do you think were the most significant developments over the past 5 years or even 10 years steering the world toward personalized medicine?
Well, sure, there's been a big advance in cancer with the recognition as a genomic disease that we can use genomics to screen mutations or even sequencing or even liquid biopsies, even the diagnosis in recent months in people who are healthy, that they have cell-free tumor DNA in a blood sample. So this is, I think, the beginning of a whole change in our outlook towards cancer, from treatment to even prevention and the earliest diagnosis. The second big area that is extraordinary is the ability to diagnose people with serious illness who have remained undiagnosed, whether that's newborns who are very sick, or now adults, and even within hours through sequencing. So this is extraordinary, and now it's using not just the sequencing, but AI tools to rapidly get a diagnosis. But of course, there's many other frontiers that are happening concurrently. Perhaps, of course, the biggest breakthrough in life science in our life is genome editing and the ability to cure diseases that previously were incurable. Just this week, of course, there was the paper on hemophilia B in the New England Journal with remarkable success, even in people who had preformed antibodies to the viral vector. So we're making steady progress, but unfortunately, there's specific domains in which we've seen genomics and individualized medicine may make headway. For example, pharmacogenetics was supposed to be a big area that we would understand the interactions of each drug and particular gene makeup, and we haven't seen wide-scale use of pharmacogenomics, which is a disappointment since there's so much data there. And I think that actually represents the broader problem. We have a lot of data that sits in the research papers, beautiful research papers in top journals, but we don't implement that into medical practice.
So just to probe further on that, how do we encourage scientists to move further from amassing data, but to implementation? What's the gap? How do we fill that?
Yes. Well, in the case, the pharmacogenomics is a really good case study because there's well over 100 to 200 medications where we understand genomic interactions, but we hardly ever use that data because it's never been made practical. It's never been made quick and inexpensive. And so instead, we have this problem of, taking weeks and very expensive to get the data back. And by that time, of course, the person's medication response is already sorted out frequently. So that is, I think, a very common problem. The same sort of thing happens with polygenic risk scores. We have so many well-validated polygenic risk scores with actionable potential, but we don't implement them because we don't have low cost, very inexpensive, very practical way of getting all that data back to people. And also with the caveats that it's potentially helpful. It's not, of course, deterministic. And so we fumble, I think, really with the opportunities that we have where there's vast increases in knowledge, but we don't translate that into helping patients. Part of that is also paternalism, that we as in the research community, we don't want people to get this data because it could be misused. We don't acknowledge that actually people can do pretty well. They can handle the truth. They can handle their data. So I'm hoping we have less paternalism in the years ahead.
Thank you so much for that message. We need to have less paternalism in science. I think that's very powerful. But in your answer now, you spoke about a few tools for genomic medicine. And I think that leads quite nicely into my next question. So I want to know from you, what is the role of new as well as adapted technologies in driving forward the personalized medicine agenda? Is there a personalized medicine agenda?
Yes, I think this is, a fundamental point that hope I can transmit adequately. It isn't just genomics. It's genomics plus these layers of data that, of course, include the biologic layers with RNA and proteins, the gut and general microbiome, the epigenome, but also, of course, immunome, our physiome through sensors, our anatomy through now things like smartphone ultrasound, high resolution, and other ways of getting medical imaging. And then, of course, the environment. So these layers of data that define uniqueness, the individual story, we're just starting to get a sense of how much more powerful that is than just trying to rely on one layer of data. Of course, it's a challenge analytically. Multimodal AI is really the current big challenge in AI. Whether or not these foundation or large language models will help us in that regard, it's certainly an opportunity, but we need to get beyond the genome-centric world that we've been in almost for 2 decades. That is, yes, the genome has powerful information, but it has some limitations that we need to acknowledge. And when we couple that and we have orthogonal views of an individual through these other layers of data, and we can integrate that data, it's a complex task, we will then start to fulfill that mission of deep phenotyping. That is, understanding what makes each person unique, what makes us tick.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. So there's no doubt that in some parts of the world, for example, low resource setting, like Africa, where the conference is currently taking place, South America, as well as many parts of Asia, South Asia, LMICs, as I would say, people will not have access to individualized medicine due to finances, due to lack of prioritization by their governments because they're focusing on other poverty eradication or other more inverted commas, important challenges or immediate challenges, or rather simply because there are no data, which you spoke about a lot, data and how there's paternalism with data and whatnot, but in some low resource settings, there isn't any data to inform appropriate approaches. So there's no data to inform approaches that medical doctors and other scientists take. Do you have any ideas about how to level the playing field? Because it's quite unequal.
Right. This is a deep concern about inequities and the level accessibility to the advances that are being made in medicine, and particularly the things we're talking about. We can't even get one layer, no less, all the layers of data for each person. There are some encouraging things. So, for example, with the use of AI, there's actually more uptake, for example, with the smartphone ultrasound for imaging in low and middle income countries. I mean, for example, it's more commonly used in certain parts of Africa and India and South America than we are seeing even in, the countries like the US, because AI can help guide an untrained person to acquire the medical images and then have auto interpretation. Similarly, the ability to train the interpretation of pathology slides to pick up a driver mutation with no sequencing is an ability to, for example, in cancer, to jump forward without even having to go through layers of data. And we're seeing that, of course, with AI, not the ability to define not just the driver mutation, the origin of the tumor, structural variations, even prognosis. So one of the things that's interesting is that there's potential to use this analytic approach to help reduce inequities, because another way that's exciting, of course, is if you can have a whole genome sequence for very, for remarkably inexpensive. I mean, we're not even talking about $100. We're talking about, even significantly less than that. So the cost is coming down. The tools to impute data from low pass sequencing, for example, or even from an array, microarray. There are many things that are in the hopper right now that could help reduce inequities. But right now, the default is if we just move as we have in the past, we could make things worse. And that would be very, very seriously unfortunate.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. I like the fact, or rather, I'm informed personally about the statistics of AI usage in LMIC. So I think I want to read more about that. I'll go to your website to find some articles there, hopefully. But my question is, you mentioned something about how the cost is getting lower and lower, meaning more people are going to have access to this. So obviously, I'm pro equity, I'm pro everybody accessing resources, but what are the, so there are a lot of pros, obviously, people have individualized medicine, but what are the dangers? What are the negatives of personalized medicine becoming more accessible?
Well, this is, there are barriers at every level, and it's an uphill fight to get this, as we've seen, now a couple of decades since the draft human genome. But, one of the things that is a fantasy for me is that we would have a global digital infrastructure for digital twins. So if somebody in anywhere in the world actually had a new diagnosis of cancer, let's just for an example, and you could find with nearest neighbor analysis their closest twins to predict the treatment, best treatment and outcome. So today we rely on clinical trials, but they're very soft in terms of giving the type of precision regarding a typical clinical trial might help 10 out of 100 people, and then we treat the other 90 people with the same treatment, not knowing it would help. But here you'd have the ability to, throughout the world, to take individualized medicine, this is with AI, and be able to implement, not just in cancer, but preventing lots of other conditions that are serious, with specific treatments for that person that we know works in others. So that we learn, talk about a learning health system. Now, the problem we have with that is that we have lots of nationalism. We have countries that don't get along, that need to work together. They can't put aside the importance of health of the species with their other interests. So the dream is that we someday could get over that, and we could actually work all together to help benefit humankind, because this is really in our grasp over the years ahead. It's not imminent, but we're already starting to see a digital infrastructure resource being built for cancer. And of course, it could be built out. We need as many people, billions of people as possible, to make this thing really be a winner. But I remain optimistic someday we'll all work together, and wouldn't that be extraordinary?
Your optimism is contagious with all the challenges that we're facing in the world. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling very hopeful now. But can we kindly look into the future, as you already have? You are hopeful that things will get better and that our leaders will put humanity first, because it's all about humankind and making sure that we improve health for us as a species. If we turn into the future, can you please shortly and quickly sketch for us or map for us the blueprint or your ideas around what do you think the world would look like in about 5 years, in 2030? Will we be closer to clinical use of personalized, individualized medicine? Is there likely to be more equitable benefit by then, or do we be far?
Right. I think, 5 years in medicine is unfortunately not very long, because it takes a terribly long time to get things to change. But what you can see starting to evolve now, it won't be across the board. It will be in specific areas. Cancer is perhaps the one that is most ripe, because it's a genomic disease, and every person's cancer is unique, just like the person is. But I do think today we have these various ways to potentially diagnose cancer at a microscopic level, whether it's using methylation, whether it's using sequencing or fragments or whatnot. I do think that we will start to see, not just in 2030, but perhaps, maybe another 5 years beyond that cancer screening will become routine every year through a tube of blood, using multi-layered data, not just one of these to be able to have very high levels of accuracy. And so the way we screen for cancer today, and we typically pick it up when it's at the macro level, is not acceptable. We need to do much better. And we know the propensity, the genes that give a predisposition to cancer in people. So we can pull that together. That hasn't even been done yet. We just say, oh, if you're over 50, maybe you should have one of these tests. So cancer, you know, today, the developments in cancer have led to various drugs that are terribly, ridiculously expensive. And overall, they don't really change the lifespan, the quality of life for patients, except for maybe several months. They're often not curative. So we need to do much better. And one of the ways we can do that is the earliest possible diagnosis. The other big thing, of course, is genome editing. And this brings us back to the point you raised about inequities, which is so serious, because we will have the ability to cure so many diseases, but at absurd costs that can untenable. And now we're seeing things, you know, for being able to cure the potential of even heart conditions, which weren't conceived early. It was thought to be, you know, blood, you know, cell engineering, CAR T for cancer, or eye diseases where you could directly inject. But now we're actually seeing things that are, you know, much more broad. So there will be, over the next 5 and 10 years, much more genome editing, which is in many respects the quintessential signature of individualized medicine. So these are just some examples. We'll see more things overall, but it won't be like an on-off switch, unfortunately. It's going to be particular domains of medicine that make steady and important progress, rather than the entire, you know, shakeup of how medicine is practiced.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to new developments and discoveries, as you're mentioning. So the International Congress of Human Genetics, the ICSG 2023, is being held in Cape Town and in Africa for the first time. And over the last few years, the world has really seriously started talking about the importance of the African genome or African genomics. What are your thoughts around that? Because I mean, there's projects which have achieved amazing research and results, Edge to Africa, for instance. What are your thoughts around the world seeing the importance of the African genomics and genetics in general?
Well, during the pandemic, Africa really signed on as a world leader, and certainly the whole group led by Tulio, colleagues there, lit up the world. I mean, unbelievable contributions. The diagnosis first sequence of 2 of the most important variants of the whole pandemic, you know, Omicron and before that Beta. So this contributions show that Africa is a front runner, no less how it overall has handled the pandemic, but the science that's come. And it's not just sequencing. It's been clinical characterization. It's been, you know, across the board. It's been extraordinary. We have looked to the scientists in Africa, and particularly in South Africa, to lead the way. For example, not just that this is the variant of interest, but also how does it behave immunologically, functionally? And the various labs there were the first to publish in the world many times throughout the pandemic. So it's been a stunner. It's been wonderful to see this. And you showed the world in South Africa how to do it. And I know, speaking for my colleagues here, we've been so duly impressed, and you know, we hope that this great momentum, we know it will continue, but it's really something to be proud of.
Thank you so much. And I'm as an African, as a South African, I'm really proud to be from here due to those discoveries. So one of the things we keep hearing at the Congress and just generally is lack of government support, lack of government uptake. lack of government understanding and interest in African genetics and just the field, scientific field in general. What do you think African scientists can do to push for more funding and support from government, but also other funding agencies?
Right. This is really interesting because, as you know, the UK has been, I think, the leader in the world of genomics, and not just the UK Biobank, but they have, even though they have a health system that's strapped financially, they keep dedicating more funds to doing more in genomics beyond the rest of us, whether it's US or South Africa, other key places around the world that have a keen interest in this space. So it is about priorities, as you're alluding to. Why is this such an important priority? And I think what we have to do is appeal, whether it's to governments or other agencies that can provide support, that this is the secret to better health. We can't promote better human health without doing this. It's unquestionable. And you know, I think we can use the precedents where we have made important advances, but it's clear we're on the cusp of doing so much more. Now that we recognize that we can do deep phenotyping of each individual, the investments that the UK made in the biobank, which was not that much when you look at the big picture, have been extraordinary. There's not a week that goes by without a significant paper coming out of that information resource. So I hope that we will have learned from this, that not to turn our back, but to go heavier in the priority of genomic and individualized medicine to change the course of prevention of human diseases, or of course, those people who are affected with the condition, far better treatment and outcomes.
Thank you so much for your time. So my penultimate question is that you're very popular on social media. You have a huge following, and I think there's a reason for that. And I think you've been one of the key scientists during COVID who are fighting against misinformation. And I think it shows how important it is for scientists to use social media, because yes, you write journal articles, you attend conferences and you present, but then again, your data cannot just remain in libraries. It needs to go outside into the world. So as someone who has such huge following, for instance, how do you think we should improve as scientists who are not on Twitter or on Facebook or in LinkedIn even? How do we improve our outreach and public engagement as well as science communication of individualized medicine? How do we communicate to lay people who are not necessarily experts in the field?
Yeah, those are very good points that you're getting to here. So firstly, I hope we can get everyone to be activists and participate in social media. And the reason we desperately need that is, as you touched on, there's so much misinformation and even disinformation out there, and we need to crowd it out. So if all of us would put some time every day or as frequently as possible towards putting out the right information, good information, this would help to neutralize all the bad things that are out there that we don't stand up enough. The strident people that are trying to influence, you know, for example, the anti-vax movement, they are much more active and they oftentimes funded to do this. Whereas the people that are trying to do good work, we don't stand up enough for that work. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, is you got to keep it simple. No fancy jargon. Talk when you post things or when you present things, it should be the same you're presenting to lay people as you would your science peers, because we don't need to use this fancy language. And trying to keep it at a level where everyone can understand it. So those two things, becoming more active in communication, I think this is imperative for everyone in the community, especially young people coming through. And the second, of course, is, you know, try to keep it at a level where it isn't dumbing it down, it's just making it eminently more understandable.
I'm nodding my head so much because I agree with you completely. As I'm passionate about science communication, I think it's very important. And I think sometimes as scientists, we forget the importance of that area of our lives. So thank you so much for encouraging us. Thank you so much for having this conversation and giving us a bit of your thoughts and suggestions as well. Prof, before I let you go, are there any last thoughts or comments or suggestions or views on the future of genomics?
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, Paballo, and I thank you so much for the privilege of joining you in the meeting. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't get there in person, but I do think, you know, we have a great excitement that lies ahead. We've seen the importance of the tools we have, the knowledge that we glean in the face of the pandemic over the last few years. But what we can do in the future is limitless to promote human health. And so it's great. I hope that the conference is there as I know it will be, a smashing success, and hopefully we'll have the chance to visit again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.